Logan, there's a spider on your shoulder.
Where?
Stay still.
I am.
It's going on your face.
Get it.
It's going on your face.
Get it, dude.
I got it.
So instead of a typical MMA pod, we got a boxing pod. But before we start, dude, it's kind of crazy. Like, I was thinking about this beforehand, but we haven't really done like a typical fight recap in a little bit because in like the beginning of the month we had the Sean thing, but we filmed that at like the end of June, and it was the week before that where we filmed the last recap.
Yeah, then, man. Yeah. I'm back. It's been a long ass time since I've been in this seat recapping some fights. So.
Exactly. It's good to get back to like our bread and butter. So I say we hop right into it. So no UFC this time, like I said. Well, obviously there was a UFC fight, but in this one, I think we got to talk about the boxing match over the weekend between Jake Paul and Mike Perry. And for those who didn't see it, Jake Paul defeated Mike Perry via TKO in the 6th round, dropped Mike Perry 3 times, and we were talking about it a little bit before the show, but this was definitely not Mike Perry's finest performance for a multitude of reasons, and I think that MMA fans need to start understanding that, like, even if they hate Jake Paul, the guy's got hands, and if he's not fighting like a true pro boxer, he's probably going to win 99% of the time. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but, what was your take on this fight?
So, kind of like coming in, I think what really got people excited was the fact that it is Mike Perry, and that Mike Perry is a lunatic, and he will be willing to, so now that the fights happen, obviously just take everything that, like, he said it straight to Jake Paul's face, too, like, give me everything, like, I'll take everything, and he did just about, but, that doesn't translate to success in the ring and getting your hand raised after a fight.
See, he said, I'll take everything, but neglected to get it back. I think that's the main point of the fight.
So, not only he took that, but he also, and we'll touch on it more and more after we talk about the fight, but he took the obvious huge weight difference. Like, Jake Paul looked huge in there. You could see it. We all saw it. And not only did Jake Paul look huge in there, but he was a lot, like, faster to them. I mean, clearly Mike Perry gassed out, like, relatively soon. And so
getting hit all those times can't help.
Yeah,
that's the
Jake
thing.
was bigger, he was faster, and he was just more technical through 6 rounds. So,
like, I kind of want to, like, hop into that weight thing too, because that's definitely the biggest disadvantage that Mike Perry had. And Jake Paul was like, oh, he only weighed 10 pounds less than me on fight night. But Jake Paul cuts to get to cruiserweight, and he's fighting these former MMA fighters who fought at like 170 or 185. So he's still fighting like a smaller person, even if they're not necessarily smaller on the night. And the size difference was, like you said, it was very clear. But then you go to the technique too. Just the fact that Mike Perry was following him the whole time, and it was just making it so easy for Jake to counter and to basically sit back and land those counters throughout the whole fight. And like you said, he has speed, he has power, whether people want to admit that or not. And like, more people need to realize that if these MMA fighters, unless it's like an Alex Pereira or somebody like that, if they're going to go into boxing, it's not going to translate. It almost never does. It's a different sport.
Dude, Mike Perry got just straight up was overwhelmed in there. Because even retreating and fighting off the back foot, like, you could see Mike Perry tentative to throw and stuff. Like, the crowd was trying to, I think at a point the crowd was trying to pick out Mike Perry, and because like we all want to see like a better fight from on both ends, and not one guy just straight up dominate and pick apart the other. But Mike Perry clearly, like, it's a different game. Like, it's a different game of MMA, and then this guy's doing bare knuckles, so obviously when you put the padding on, with the gloves on your hands, like, a guy like Mike Perry is going to be more inclined to be able to take all that damage that he did when he's been through all that he's been through. So
I'm just not impressed. Like, not to say that Jake Paul doesn't have boxing skills, because he clearly does. Again, you just have to admit that at this point. But it's the fact that he's fighting guys who are 2 weight classes below him when they're at their right weight. And then also he's fighting MMA guys. And the one time he fought a pro boxer in Tommy Fury, he didn't win that fight. So it's kind of like tough to have respect for a guy who's almost bullying people in a way because he's fighting these smaller guys who don't have the same boxing skills in like traditional pro boxing that he has. And I just that because of that, it's hard for me to get behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but here's the thing. So, and this is because Jake Paul said this, but if you gave him 2 years, then where and what would we be saying about Jake Paul in 2 years? Whether or not, because he's talking about he wants to win the cruiserweight title in the next 2 years. I don't, I don't really know of like a path to that, to be honest.
I don't know if like he could be a big enough draw, but eventually he would have to fight somebody ranked in order to get in the top 5 or top 10 of one of those organizations. But I just don't see it. Like, I don't think he's good enough, honestly. And it's not because he hasn't progressed so much. It's more so just these guys who are at the very top. These people have mostly been boxing like their whole lives. So it's a hard learning curve to get to that level. And I think if he fought a ranked opponent, he would lose. Because like I said, look at what happened when he fought Tommy Fury. Again, it was a close fight, kind of. But he didn't look very impressive in there. And he's beating up these MMA guys who are way smaller.
But even with Tommy Fury, like even that in and of itself is like, at least these days Tommy Fury is not the guy that's really gonna get in there and box anymore. So, like I guess that was the fight for him to really, I guess, open up a lot more eyes, but once again, he didn't win anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
He's had some performances that have genuinely like impressed me by like the way he was able to overcome the adversity versus Nate Diaz, the fights with Tyron Woodley. Like, he has timing and he has power, but it's like when you're fighting a person who's not a boxer, it's hard for me to give you like the full credit. And we haven't even talked about the age factor for most of these. Like, at least Mike Perry is still fighting really in a way, but like he's fought all these guys now who are so much older. Like he fought Nate Diaz, who's like 36, 37 at this point. Anderson Silva, I think, was 46 when he fought him. Tyron Woodley was getting up there post UFC. It just doesn't impress me. And like, even if you want to go back to the earliest fight, I mean, Nate Robinson, he wasn't even in the NBA when he fought him. Like, at least you could say, oh, he fought like a pro athlete, but like Nate Robinson, he was way past it at that point. So you can't even really give him full credit for that. It sucks because I almost have like a conflicted viewpoint on this because, again, like, he has real boxing skills. Like, he'll beat some Joe off the street. Like, nobody understands that. Like, all these telephone tough guys in the comments in all these posts, like, he's trash, he's horrible. Like, he's not horrible, but it's just the fact that he's fighting these people who are definitely, they really just have a puncher's chance, to put it bluntly. Like, they're not coming in there and they're not going to have good odds to win coming in against Jake Paul, who has legitimately gotten himself to a decent level as a boxer. But I don't think he's at that top level because he's yet to prove that he can really beat like a real pro boxer. And I think he wants to get that stain off because obviously he called out Alex Pereira and Conor McGregor, and the Pereira one I just don't think is going to happen. And McGregor, it's the same as all these other ones. This is a guy who fought at an even lower weight class at one point, 145, 155. And yeah, he's going up to like 170 when he fights Chandler now. But again, what are you proving by beating these MMA guys in boxing? I think McGregor, it would impress me like more than the past ones have, but still, it just doesn't prove anything. You said he wants to be cruiserweight champion. These are not the fights that are going to convince me that he's anywhere near capable of that.
Yeah, that's just about it, very much.
Yeah, and I think that's really all we can say for the fight talk because, again, you can analyze the technical side of it as much as you want, but when Mike Perry was in the ring, literally just following Jake Paul around, no footwork, it's kind of hard to say, oh, Jake Paul looked super impressive in there because it's not exactly hard to counter somebody who's just walking towards you and not giving you much to think about, So the next like phase that I kind of want to go to with this is talking about Jake Paul and his impact on combat sports as a whole. Do you think Jake Paul is good or bad for combat sports? Or in the middle, honestly, if you think that.
Well, I think not to say that Jake Paul is all that. Not to say Jake Paul is bad for combat sports, but I think Jake Paul kind of has maybe something like he has the idea, but is it really the right idea, or is it just more to stroke Jake Paul's ego, and it's just more in it for himself and just more glory for himself? Because
I'm gonna go with that one.
Yeah, well, because he's given these MMA guys this this opportunity to obviously make a lot of money and then get their name out there even more. But not only is it a different sport, but these guys they're past their prime. Like what really made them who they are is now in the past, and not many people are gonna pay attention to that when
and in a different sport, not just in the past, but also just a different sport completely. And people don't.
When they're
I feel like the
losing,
casual fans don't understand that. You know what I mean? Because they see like a guy who's maybe good at boxing and MMA. It doesn't translate that well.
Who would ever thought that Ben Askren would be boxing?
Sometimes I forget that even happened. Because that one was one of those ones where I was like, I don't know why they're even doing this. I remember, I'll never forget like the way Ben Askren built that fight. He was like, I'm not a good boxer. I understand that. But I don't think he is either. And if he is, he'll beat me. And that's exactly what happened. Like, he has hands. He does have skills. But, you mentioned his intentions. I think that maybe, like, good things can be done even if you don't have the best intentions. Like, he's getting
he just wants to be the face, like, the golden boy of everything. So, like, PFL, for instance, like, sure, he, maybe the funding part of all that is a lot of thanks to Jake Paul, but for one, like, it's not like we've seen Jake Paul get in the smart cage yet, and another is like he obviously takes a lot of credit for being able to bring over someone like Francis Ngannou to the boxing world, and then obviously getting Francis to sign under PFL as well. But we haven't seen Francis either yet really do anything with PFL, and then Francis is another MMA fighter that crossed over to boxing and hasn't won yet. So like I said, he probably has the right intention and stuff. Like clearly he cares about the sport, but it's an ego thing.
I want to bring this up too about Francis Ngannou, and like, I don't mean this like as disrespect or anything, because I remember me and you, we were talking a couple weeks ago. He had the whole tragedy with his kid. Like, I'm not trying to kick him while he's down, but if we're just talking specifically his boxing career, he looked good against Tyson Fury, but that was Tyson Fury who didn't think that Francis Ngannou had any, like, could hold water in the ring with him. And then when he fought Anthony Joshua and a real boxer took him seriously, that's the gap between a great boxer and a really good MMA fighter who like has good boxing in that sport, because that one wasn't even close. Because like I know, we're not as popular with the boxing fans. We've talked about that in the past, but like I definitely do not agree with anyone who's going to say in the comments like, oh, well, look at Francis Ngannou or look at Conor McGregor versus Floyd, because those are two outliers, because those two did not take either of them seriously. And in Ngannou's case, once someone did, it was a clear difference in skill. And Jake is a whole other story.
Those are with Francis, like, I wouldn't even say like the irony with Francis Ngannou and Conor McGregor that you just mentioned in the same grouping there, but like those two are also like, these are super fights that they are fighting in, like between Conor and Floyd, and then Francis just being a heavyweight. Like,
and they're good MMA boxers. So, like, the casual fan would be like, oh, it has to translate. But it doesn't. Like, if that was Floyd Mayweather on, like, a real camp who truly thought that Conor McGregor could beat him, that fight would not have been close. I don't think Conor would have hit him once.
No.
So, And that's saying like Conor McGregor is a good MMA boxer. It's just different. But to go back to like whether we think Jake is like good or not for combat sports, I kind of like agree with you. I think in some ways he is because he does give these names exposure that maybe like the casual fan wouldn't know, like a Mike Perry or like a Ben Askren, a Tyron Woodley. But at the same time, I do think it's probably more for personal gain and like it is what it is. I can't hate on a guy for wanting to like build his brand and make money. You know what I mean? Like that's not the reason why I kind of dislike what he does sometimes. It's more so again just like it's the bully aspect of it. He's fighting these guys who have fought in 2 to 3 weight classes lower than him or guys who are about 20 to 30 years older than him. If you want to go Mike Tyson route, 40 years older than him. Or no, yeah, that's 30. That's never mind. I can't even do math anymore. Jeez, that's what a communications degree will do to you, man. You forget how to do simple math. But honestly, like, until he fights a real pro in that weight class and does well, it's hard to give him credit. And people are gonna say when he fights Mike Tyson, if he beats him, oh, he beat Mike Tyson, but like he's beating Mike Tyson fresh off of a medical emergency who's nearly 60 years old. Like that's what people want to see. Like that'll like yeah, Mike Tyson was the man back in the day, but a 60-year-old versus a 27-year-old, I don't want the casuals to kind of be blinded by the name because yeah, he's Mike Tyson, but he's not the same guy. He's just not. And we were talking on the podcast with Sean too. Remember about the creative editing of his pad work, and it sucks too because I'm seeing these videos after the Perry fight of like Mike Tyson like hyped up wanting to fight Jake Paul. I'm like, oh god, I'm like, don't go back in that direction, please.
Here's the thing too. I think while we might talk about whether or not Jake Paul is bringing good or bad to combat sports, these guys that he's fighting, obviously crossing over from MMA, I'd like to think that they think he's bad for combat sports, and that because
but he's also giving them a payday.
Yeah,
like that's kind of where you have to weigh it. Like,
but I think also at the
money.
same time, like they're gonna make money anyway. So I think they obviously, if they're gonna get the opportunity, then they obviously are really thinking like, no, I can beat this guy. Like I'm a fighter first. Jake Paul is just a boxer. And
I truly think they believe that.
Yeah, and whether
they just don't get it.
No matter how exactly, and at the end of the day, like these guys, like Mike Perry, like we just said, has taken a bunch, like a shit ton of damage and punches to the face that we could ever like imagine. So, this guy obviously thinks like, I'm gonna be the one to finally rid Jake Paul, because once Jake Paul does, and Jake Paul in the back of his mind knows this too, once he does face an actual pro in the cruiserweight division, and he maybe does, even if he doesn't get knocked out, is on the losing end, then he's gonna, that's gonna really probably that's probably gonna do like a lot of negative to his confidence, honestly, and really like show him like, there's levels to this.
I just really don't think he's ever going to actually do that. Like, he might say he wants to do that, but where is that good for his brand, getting his ass kicked by, like, a real top 10, like, cruiserweight boxer? That's the thing. Like, he wants to make money. That's the main thing.
Like Conor McGregor, for instance, like, he thinks fights like this are just a mockery of fighting in general. Like, he'll call out Jake Paul and Mike Perry and be like, you guys both suck. So.
Yeah, both of those tweets he put out on Fight Night were pretty good. One calling Jake Paul a piss bag, and then the other one, Mike Perry, you're fired. I just love to like imagine like him just sitting in his like living room, like just drinking some proper 12 and just burying people on Twitter.
The yacht with the gym.
Yeah, God, but I mean, Jake called him out too, like I said, and that's not even impressive either. Like,
like okay, the guy, Jake Paul, he knows promotion.
Yeah, no, I'll give him that. Like, that's why I don't think it's totally bad, because the consequences of losing in boxing, it's not good, totally bad. He's giving exposure to these fighters, and people who may not naturally watch combat sports may get. I think
he gets that in order to really legitimize it, then the promoter himself has to get in there, step the ropes, and sell his own fight pretty much. So.
I also don't think he cares about the things that we're talking about with like how he's fighting these older MMA fighters or people who are like weight classes below him, because at the end of the day, we mentioned it with the Mike Tyson thing. He really just wants the names on his resume, because a casual fan will see someone like Tyron Woodley, like, oh, former UFC champion, or Anderson Silva, even like big star. They don't give a shit that they're old or that they're past their primes. They don't, but it's not that it's lame. They don't know. Like, if you're not a real fan, you see what this person's done. You're thinking to yourself, oh, that's a bad dude right there. But they're not factoring in how much the skills are going to degrade outside of their natural sport or outside of their primes. Like, that's really what bothers me a little bit, because it's like a false narrative that like the more casual fans, like his fans, believe, which is not the case.
All they're looking at is the fight history, and I guess they don't. Yeah, exactly. They didn't really know. They don't really take into account the bigger picture, I guess.
I mean, if you saw his resume and you didn't know any better, right? And you see like Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, Anderson Silva, Nate Diaz. It doesn't impress me because you know the difference. But if you got to think about it from the perspective of somebody who truly doesn't know anything about combat sports, and you see those names that are like big names, it may impress them. But
you don't factor in either like I mentioned it before, but you don't factor in either all the damage these guys have accumulated through their MMA career.
Yeah.
Jake is obviously like still just starting with boxing, so.
Yeah, that's also very true. I mean, the lack of times he's been hit in the head definitely has to help. And I don't know. I think it's the reason why I said at first like good or bad, and then I was like, oh, well, maybe in the middle, because I think honestly the more I put my mind to it, that's kind of where I fall, in the middle, because in some aspects, it's good for the exposure, but the consequences of losing a boxing match and getting your ass beat like that, it's not necessarily great for the fighter's health, even if it's good for their bank account. So that's kind of the thing that I take away from it. But more eyes on combat sports is always a good thing, and maybe more eyes on combat sports means more eyes on her handbook at the end of the day. So maybe it'll help us. So maybe we'll get a few Jake Paul fans in here. But next weekend we're back to some real fights. I mean, we had the UFC this past weekend, but it was another Apex card, and this felt like the bigger thing. But next weekend, we got UFC 304. That's going to be crazy. 2 championship fights, both rematches, too. Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad,
2 UK champions.
And Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blades, 2. Paddy Pimblett in the UK. That's going to be electric versus Bobby or King Green.
Yeah,
I think that's legally official now.
No, that's legal,
Yeah. I love when he posted the thing on his Instagram, and then everybody was like stupid in the comments, were like, dude, your social security number's on. I'm like, what birth certificate has that on? Like, but whatever. It's definitely interesting that he changed his name to King. I don't know what I think about that. I love how Paddy Pimblett too. He goes, that's the CTE kicking in. I'm like, dude, come on. I think this is the last fight on Paddy's UFC contract. He said that, I think, to MMA Junkie fairly recently. So I don't know if he wants to get into the boxing realm, because he expressed interest on maybe doing something outside of the UFC if he can. But who knows if that's just a negotiation tactic to get the most money in your next UFC contract, because I don't know why he would go and box. I think that'd be kind of crazy. But he's going to have to definitely deal with some good stand-up with King Green in there. But I'm excited for these 2 championship rematches. I mean, anytime Leon Edwards gets in the cage, I'm excited for it. That Bilal fight, dude, we've been talking about that for literally over a year at this point. It's such a long time coming. And then Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blades, that's a rematch that kind of needed to happen. We didn't really get to see a fight between them in the first one because of Aspinall's knee injury. So I'm glad we're going to get to see 2 of the best heavyweights on the planet to get in there and fight for an interim title. And hopefully the winner of that will be fighting John Jones, hopefully sooner rather than later. But, we'll see what happens with that. It's gonna be crazy. Can't wait to come back next week with that pay-per-view recap and see y'all then.
See ya.
Feels just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.